when I was a child, every day somebody asked me to sing. And at that time it was boring for me because I preferred to stay with my friends outside. And probably step by step I thought, okay, it was it's my destiny. Probably I have to sing in my life, I think.
Andrea Bocelli's voice has filled stadiums, cathedrals, and living rooms in nearly every corner of the world. He is the tenor who turned blindness into the beginning of a story rather than the end of one. The boy from a small Tuscan farmhouse who grew up to sing for popes, presidents, and hundreds of millions of listeners. But the story behind that voice is not only one of triumph. It is also a story of quiet grief, public storms he never asked for, and choices that reveal far more about the man than any award ever could. This is the story of Andrea Bocelli, not the legend on the poster, but the person behind it. Andrea Bocelli was born on September 22, 1958, in the countryside near Lajatico, Tuscany, to Alessandro and Eddie Bocelli, a family that made its living from farming and selling agricultural machinery. From the moment he was born, Andrea's eyes carried a burden most children never have to think about. He was diagnosed with congenital glaucoma, a condition that clouded his sight almost from birth. Doctors at the time raised concerns about complications during the pregnancy, but his mother chose to continue regardless, a decision Bocelli has since credited with shaping his lifelong reverence for the fragility and value of life itself. He grew up on the family farm in La Sterza, a quiet corner of Tuscany where evenings were filled not with screens or noise, but with conversation, food, and, most importantly, music. Even as a small child with severely limited vision, Andrea gravitated toward sound the way other children reach for toys. At 6, he began piano lessons. It didn't stop there. Over the following years, he picked up the flute, the saxophone, the trumpet, the trombone, the guitar, and the drums, working his way through instrument after instrument as though searching for the one that would let him say something words couldn't. It was his nanny who unknowingly set the course of his life. She gave him a record by the great Italian tenor Franco Corelli, and something in young Andrea shifted permanently. He became obsessed not just with singing, but with the specific, almost impossible power of the human voice to carry emotion undiluted. By age 7, he could recognize famous singers within seconds and would spend hours trying to recreate the exact color and shape of their voices. Then, at 12 years old, everything changed again. During a football match with friends, Andrea was struck in the eye by the ball. What little vision remained to him vanished. His parents tried everything medicine offered at the time, including treatments that today sound almost unbelievable, all in a desperate attempt to save what was left of his sight. Nothing worked. From that day on, Andrea Bocelli has lived in total blindness. Most people would understand if that moment had broken him. Instead, it seemed to sharpen his focus. Singing was no longer a hobby competing with a dozen other interests. It became the one place where the world made complete sense to him. He performed his first small concert not long after, in a village near his home, and at just 14, he entered a singing competition with the classic Neapolitan song, O Sol Mio, and won. It was an early sign of a talent that refused to be limited by circumstance. Bocelli's path to global fame was not fast, and it was not guaranteed. After finishing school in 1980, he enrolled at the University of Pisa to study law, a practical decision perhaps influenced by the uncertainty of building a career in music as a blind man in Italy at the time. To pay his way through school, he performed in piano bars at night, singing for tips and small audiences of strangers who had no idea they were listening to a future international icon. It was in one of those piano bars, in 1987, that he met a young woman named Enrica, who would later become his wife. Bocelli did eventually finish his law degree and briefly worked as a court-appointed attorney. But music never let go of him. The turning point came in 1992, when the Italian singer Zucchero was searching for a tenor to record a demo of his song Miserere. Bocelli got the opportunity to record it, and when the legendary Luciano Pavarotti heard the demo, he personally urged Zucchero to give the role to Bocelli rather than record it with anyone else. That single moment of recognition from one of opera's greatest voices cracked open a door that had, until then, seemed permanently shut. From there, things moved quickly. He was discovered by producer Caterina Caselli, signed with Sugar Music, and in 1994 entered the famous Sanremo Music Festival. winning the newcomers category with a record-setting score. His debut album went platinum within weeks. That same year, he made his opera debut as Macduff in Verdi's Macbeth and sang before Pope John Paul II at St. Peter's Basilica, an extraordinary rise for a man who, only a few years earlier, had been singing for spare change in a bar. Then came 1995 and Canti e Partiro, the ballad that would define him to much of the world. Its English-language version, Time to Say Goodbye, recorded as a duet with Sarah Brightman, became a global phenomenon, shattering sales records across Europe and beyond. The boy who lost his sight on a football field had become one of the most recognizable voices on the planet. By the late 1990s, Bocelli was no longer simply a rising star. He was a fixture of global culture. In 1998, he took on the demanding role of Rodolfo in Puccini's La Boheme, proving to skeptics that blindness had not limited his artistic ambition. That same year, his album Aria, the opera album, introduced his classical voice to an even wider audience, and he made his American debut at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. The day after that performance, he was welcomed at the White House by President Bill Clinton, a moment that captured just how far his voice had traveled. The accolades kept arriving. 2 World Music Awards, a spot on a major magazine's list of the world's most attractive people, an unusual honor for a classical crossover artist, and then one of the most beloved collaborations of his career, The Prayer, a duet with Celine Dion that would go on to win a Golden Globe and earn an Academy Award nomination. Dion herself would later tell audiences that Bocelli's voice sounded the way she imagined the divine might sound if it could sing. He toured relentlessly across every continent, performing for world leaders and ordinary families alike, and in 1999 released Sacred Arias, an album of religious music that reached #1 on the U.S. classical charts, making him the first vocalist ever to hold all 3 top chart positions simultaneously with different releases. But success brought its own weight. In 2000, his father passed away, and Bocelli chose to dedicate his historic Statue of Liberty concert to him, transforming a massive public event into something deeply personal in front of millions. Through the 2000s and into the 2010s, his life became a blur of extraordinary moments, singing Nessun Dorma at the opening of Expo 2010 in Shanghai, performing for more than 12,000 fans in a single outdoor concert in Singapore, headlining sold-out shows at London's O2 Arena, Madison Square Garden, and the Staples Center. He performed at the ancient Odeon of Herod's Atticus in Athens and near the Pyramids of Giza. Each stop added to a legend that seemed almost too large for one man to carry, and yet he kept carrying it quietly, without ever seeming to seek out the spotlight for its own sake. Not everything in Bocelli's public life has been applause. In late 2016, following Donald Trump's election victory, rumors spread that Bocelli had agreed to perform at the presidential inauguration. The backlash on social media was immediate and intense, with many calling for a boycott of the tenor. The situation was complicated by the fact that Bocelli and Trump had known each other for years, and that Bocelli had performed at private events for him in the past, something Bocelli viewed as a matter of personal courtesy rather than political endorsement. Rather than mount a public defense or engage with his critics point by point, Bocelli chose silence. He stepped back from the controversy entirely, offering no dramatic statement, no counterattack, simply removing himself from the noise. A few years later, he faced a different kind of controversy when his friend and fellow opera legend Placido Domingo became the subject of serious allegations of sexual misconduct. Much of the American opera world distanced itself from Domingo almost immediately. Bocelli did not defend the alleged conduct, but he did publicly raise the question of whether decades of an artist's work should be erased before any legal process had run its course, a position that invited criticism of its own. Even knowing that, he chose to speak, calmly and without hostility, about the importance of due process. What both moments reveal is a consistent pattern in how Bocelli handles pressure. He doesn't chase public approval, and he doesn't perform outrage for an audience. When the noise becomes too loud, he steps back. When he feels something is worth saying, he says it plainly and moves on. It's a kind of restraint that is increasingly rare for anyone living under constant public observation. His artistry itself has also long been a subject of debate. Classical purists have questioned whether his technique meets the standards of traditional opera, pointing to his breath control, phrasing, and vocal projection as areas where he falls short of the conservatory-trained tenors who came before him. Major publications have run pieces suggesting his popularity outpaces his technical mastery. Yet for every critic, there are millions of listeners, along with peers like Celine Dion, producer David Foster, and singers such as Al Jarreau, who insist that what Bocelli offers cannot be measured by technique alone. His mentor, the great tenor Franco Corelli, recognized something special in him after hearing him at a masterclass in Turin in 1986 and took him on as a private student, a stamp of approval from one of opera's most respected voices. Whether or not the critics agree, audiences have made their verdict clear for 3 decades running. Bocelli's personal life has largely unfolded away from cameras by his own choice. He married Enrica Sanzati in 1992, the same year Pavarotti first championed his talent. They had 2 sons together, Amos and Matteo, and built a quiet family life in Tuscany even as Bocelli's career began its meteoric rise. In 2002, after a decade of marriage, Andrea and Enrica separated. Neither has ever spoken publicly about the reasons, and both have maintained that respectful silence ever since, a rare thing in an industry that usually demands explanations. That same year, on a rainy night in Tuscany, Bocelli met Veronica Berti, then 18 years old. By his own account, he was drawn to her before he ever knew what she looked like. He heard her singing quietly near a piano and was captivated by her voice alone. Despite a 25-year age gap, the two built a relationship that would last well over a decade before they married in 2014 at the sanctuary of Montenero in Livorno, fittingly on the 2nd birthday of their daughter, Virginia, who was born in 2012. Becoming a father to Virginia gave Bocelli one of the most profound experiences of his life, and also one of its quiet sorrows. Unable to see his daughter's face, he learned her features the only way he could, with his hands, tracing her nose, her cheeks, her lips in the moments after her birth. It is a small, aching detail that captures something larger about his entire life. Immense love experienced through senses other than sight, and a persistent awareness of what blindness has taken from him even amid extraordinary success. His children have become extensions of his musical legacy in their own way. His son Amos, born with full eyesight, chose music anyway, becoming a pianist who has performed alongside his father. In 2018, his son Matteo joined him for an emotional duet, Fall on Me, a performance that moved audiences precisely because it needed no explanation. A father who cannot see his son, singing beside him regardless. Veronica, meanwhile, has become far more than a spouse in the traditional sense. She manages much of his career, serves as vice president of the Andrea Bocelli Foundation, and has been closely involved in producing projects tied to his artistic life, including a 2023 documentary film that followed the couple traveling across Italy on horseback, a project born out of the restlessness many people felt during the isolation of the pandemic years. Their home, Villa Alpamare, a converted hotel on the Tuscan coast that Bocelli purchased in the late 1990s, has become the physical center of that family life, a place built on music, memory, and the kind of privacy that fame rarely allows. Nearly 7 decades into his life, and more than 3 decades into his career, Andrea Bocelli shows no signs of slowing down. He is currently touring in celebration of the 30th anniversary of Romanza, the breakthrough album that first introduced much of the world to his voice, playing arenas across North America and beyond. He was also chosen as a headline performer for the opening ceremony of the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan, standing once again on one of the largest stages in the world alongside fellow music icons. A reminder that, even now, his voice is considered essential to moments the entire world is watching. What makes Bocelli's story compelling isn't a single dramatic headline. It's the accumulation of everything he has quietly carried. A childhood spent losing his sight twice, first gradually and then all at once. A career built through years of performing in piano bars before anyone knew his name. Public controversies he neither ran from nor fought loudly. A divorce he never explained and a second love he never doubted. A daughter he met with his hands instead of his eyes, and a body of work that continues to divide critics even as it unites audiences in nearly every country on earth. Perhaps that is the real story hiding behind the heartbreak people often search for when they type his name into a search bar. Not a single tragic headline, but a lifetime of small, private battles fought without an audience. Battles that shaped the voice millions have come to know, and the man very few ever truly see. In the end, Andrea Bocelli's story isn't defined by what he lost. It's defined by everything he built anyway, in spite of it, and often because of it.